Good afternoon. Again, this is Ben Zong with the California Fuel Cell Partnership. Welcome to today's webinar. A couple of things before we get started. First, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type it into the ask a question on the GoToWebinar application. Again, that's going to be in your top right of your screen. And so again, please ask questions and we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar. If you can't hear or see the presentation during the webinar, please go ahead and put that in the question as well, and we will look into that as well. At the end, if you have any other webinar suggestions, please go ahead and email that to info@cafcp.org, and we will look into adding those webinars into our series moving forward. The presentations will be available after the presentation is done here, and we will have that posted on our website at cafcp.org. A brief for the medium and heavy duty webinar here, Nico Bokamp will be presenting. He is the technical program manager with the California Fuel Cell Partnership.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone on the webinar. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share with you today an overview of a new strategy document that the CaFCP has released about 2 weeks ago. We see this as the start of a larger conversation at a state and a national level about this technology and its application in trucks. Moving forward. Okay. As you may know, the California Fuel Cell Partnership is a private-public partnership where industry and public entities collaborate on the introduction of fuel cell electric vehicles in California. I just want to make a shout out to the task force members that contributed to this, in particular John Mickulin at the US EPA. He was the member lead for this project, as well as to Marion Stone at BKI, Bevel Aquanite, who was the technical writer for this project and who took all our draft material and put it into the final version that you may have read already. For your context, there are close to 1 million trucks in California that are mainly running on diesel. And state and federal governments have taken steps to reduce diesel emissions. The end game of this effort, though, is to transition to zero-emission trucks in the same manner that the transition to passenger zero-emission vehicles has begun. The question is, how? For the last 2 years, we have discussed the topic of fuel cell vehicle technology for trucks with many individuals representing a wide variety of perspectives. It is a challenging topic, especially because there is no regulation requiring this zero-emission vehicle technology, making it a sensitive topic to share about. In addition, truck operators behave differently than passenger vehicle drivers and customers and require high vehicle operational reliability to do their business. The purpose of our action plan is to provide an initial path to answer the how question. Through research, and as I referred to before, the different groups that were involved, interviews and facilitated workshops with truck OEMs, truck integrators, station providers, and several other stakeholders, the project team identified 3 big picture needs, which are on the screen here. These are not sequential. All have to be done in parallel. It's important to demonstrate the technology, to spur more development, establish the necessary permanent fueling infrastructure, and to create a sustainable business case for trucks and truck manufacturers. Unlike automakers, truck manufacturers are not required to build, sell, or operate zero-emission vehicles. In fact, not many of them are even interested in zero-emission vehicle technology. Some truck OEMs increasingly use electrification of components to improve fuel economy, which is a requirement at the federal level. And along with other steps, besides electrification, there are other ones like aerodynamic designs. Our member task force identified 2 truck vocations for initial demonstration and focus due to their operational characteristics and immediate air quality benefits for surrounding communities. The demonstrations of trucks in these vocations should occur in the regions where most trucking activities occur and where air quality issues are most severe. And the two truck vocations are, for the medium-duty fuel cell electric truck platform, the Class 4 to 6 last-mile delivery package trucks, and for the heavy-duty fuel cell truck platform, the Class 7 to 8 short-haul trucks, which are also referred to drayage, but that's not a qualification that industry typically uses. One of the benefits of the chosen truck vocations is that both typically return to the home base at the end of the day. This is similar to how transit buses operate, and therefore these trucks can use many of the lessons learned from the fuel cell transit bus programs that have been operational in California for the last 10 to 15 years. Many of the recommendations in the action plan center on collecting data and using a consistent system to measure performance, progress, and success. Therefore, the action plan proposes metrics for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. And the overview you see here shows you where the focus areas are for these demonstrations and hopefully future rollout of fuel cell trucks. They're the Central Valley, the South Coast Air Basin, and the San Francisco Bay Area. A little bit more about the metrics. The action plan proposes the metrics that you see in front of you on the screen as a national proposal for targets for demonstration fuel cell trucks. These metrics meet both the needs of the fuel cell industry as well as the truck OEMs in addressing the lines of sight for customer acceptance and provide clear go, no-go decision points. All of these parameters can be used for other truck vocations as well. And an example of what we learned, we were aware of several of these items, and I don't have a pointer, so I'll try to explain it, but the third row from the bottom, when you look at durability, for example, this is a surprise for most folks involved in this project, is that, for example, baseline medium-duty package delivery trucks have an expected life of 22 years, which is completely different than what we know about passenger cars. And then, for example, the target for medium-duty trucks would be 10 to 12 years, which is sufficient to show that the technology has feasibility. To work towards successful demonstration and outcomes that can provide reliable information for decision makers, the action plan presents 5 high priority recommendations. The first one, which I referred to earlier, is to transfer the lessons learned from implementing and operating fuel cell bus programs to the trucks, especially where these lessons relate to the vehicle technology, and also to help identify or reduce risk to the financial community. And as you can see at the end, I show who we think should be responsible for each one of these high priority recommendations, and this will be true for all the recommendations that we'll show throughout this presentation, and in this case, it's the industry. The next one is to conduct data collection using a consistent set of fleet operation variables for comparison. And I showed you earlier what the parameters are for that, and for these specific truck vocations, what does it look like and what the specific numbers are, the limits are. Obviously, you have to show the reliability of these medium and heavy-duty trucks, to show the cost per mile, and the economics, which are related to the economics of the transported freight. And this is really critical to sustainable operation of this technology. And the industry is responsible for that. We propose that the industry is responsible for that. The next one is to establish targets and priorities for future medium and heavy-duty fuel cell vehicle funding programs. And this is related to funding available and the results that come out of potentially funded projects in the federal government has started some of this, so we assume that they could take this on in the future as well. Then the last priority recommendation related to demonstrations is to initiate, expand, and direct national efforts to perform in-depth studies of this technology in trucks, to understand what makes up the total cost of ownership and where there are opportunities for cost reduction, and also is federal government's responsibility. The next area of importance is the infrastructure. Within our group, we already understand the importance of needing hydrogen fueling stations slightly before vehicles. But that isn't well understood with new stakeholders, such as the trucking industry. We will need to make the case for capital and O&M funding, operation and maintenance funding, for permanent heavy-duty stations in addition to the build-out of retail hydrogen stations. It is also important that we think about areas where medium and heavy-duty trucks could use existing hydrogen stations, because all the currently funded hydrogen stations, as I will come back to later, are not able to facilitate trucks for fueling. The Ramos oil station in West Sacramento was originally a truck-only station. Although an island of pumps sells fuels to passenger cars, the station itself has high canopies and wide driveways, so good ingress and egress, as they refer to in the trucking industry, that make it easy for trucks to pull in and out. And one note is that H35, which is hydrogen fuel at 35 MPa or 350 bar, is currently sufficient for trucks, but that may change in the future depending on need and interest. And you can find more about that in the document. To work towards the implementation of permanent anchor fueling stations that provide fuel for vehicle developers and operators wanting to test fuel cell trucks, the action plan provides 4 high priority recommendations. The first one, which is actually the highest priority, is to fund initial private or commercial hydrogen fueling infrastructure, and including so both capital costs as well as operation and maintenance in the early years. And because this is applicable to California, we thought it best for the state government to be responsible for this recommendation. Then another area that needs to be worked on is to develop the current SAE J2601-2 technical information report, which is for fueling gaseous hydrogen-powered heavy-duty vehicles, to the level of a full standard and generate data to fill the gap that currently exists in fueling standards, which is 6 to 10 kilograms of hydrogen dispensed at 35 MPa. Make sure that everyone can fuel and stations are consistently fueling trucks. This would be a government and industry shared responsibility. Related to the first 2 items is the next priority recommendation, and that's to consolidate funded truck projects in development of commercial hydrogen heavy-duty fueling infrastructure, so stations have a higher throughput, meaning that there is a reduced cost of fuel and the capital expense of the infrastructure. And this also focuses truck projects, and they all can use the same station, so there's not necessarily a need to establish as wide and big of a fueling infrastructure at this point as it is in place, or it needs to be in place for passenger cars. This is also an industry and government shared responsibility. And finally, 4th priority recommendation is to continue to support fuel cell bus centers of excellence, such as are in place at Sunline Transit in Coachella Valley and at AC Transit in the San Francisco Bay Area, to prove the infrastructure and fuel cost reduction and develop the necessary expertise and understanding about fueling large fleets of trucks. And this would be a federal and state government's responsibility. The truck OEMs who participated in the project identified these 7 major components as necessary for a sustainable business case. I want to emphasize that, like all companies with new technologies, the OEMs, the truck manufacturers, would not expect these on day one. This is a process that would happen over time. To achieve these, our industry must build a better understanding of the truck market, just as the California Fuel Cell Partnership built with gas station owners to advance retail hydrogen stations. The workshops that we conducted for this action plan were a good first step, but only a first step. Government may need to assess options for developing a zero-emission vehicle credit or a long-term incentive strategy for medium and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles to encourage truck integrators and OEMs to invest in the research and development and demonstration of fuel cell technology in trucks. The bottom line of all of this is a sustainable business case is really the total cost of ownership, and it should be competitive with conventional technology that's being used now by trucking companies. To work towards a context where it is sustainable to manufacture, sell, and operate fuel cell trucks, in other words, a sustainable business case, as I showed you before on the previous slide, the action plan provides five high-priority recommendations. The first one is related to a mutual understanding by government and industry. There should be a better understanding of what truck manufacturing entails, including the creation process in the context of fuel cell truck technology development. This is currently not well understood, and both industry and government are responsible for informing each other. When setting targets, stakeholders should assume a timeline of 7 to 15 years for developing new truck platforms. Normally this is 5 to 7 years for technology or truck platforms that are based on conventional technology, because the technology, the baseline technology is already understood, but in this case fuel cell technology is not well understood by the truck manufacturers, so it can be expected to take a lot longer, and therefore 7 to 15 years is a more reasonable time to expect for the development of a truck that's available in the market. The next priority recommendation is to establish separate stakeholder groups for the truck vocations that we identified earlier for drayage and package delivery, to discuss and provide realistic market information about what the baseline requirements are and what the expectations are. And this is really an industry task, we think, in our opinion. So the next and fourth priority recommendation is to assess options for developing a zero-emission vehicle credit, which could help out incentivize and start up the development of zero-emission fuel cell trucks to encourage the trucking industry, as well, especially the truck integrators and OEMs, the truck OEMs, to invest in the R&D of fuel cell technology in trucks. This is something that's really a task for the federal and state government to look into. Then the final highest priority recommendation in this area is to assess the corporate operating structure options that create economic benefits for medium and heavy duty truck operators, and initiate that within the coming 5 to 10 years, so they are encouraged to invest in this and explore this technology as an option for the future and help out to reduce the emissions that trucks produce at this point. And this is a government and industry shared responsibility. Overall, this document focuses on achieving four main areas. I've shared with you the priority recommendations, and you'll find several other recommendations listed in the action plan. They're in the appendix. The complete plan and the summary version of this document are available for download on the Bus and Trucks page of the California Fuel Cell Partnership website, and you can see the link for that here. And I think most of you that are registered for this webinar, received that in the mailing as well. So the four focus areas are really to accelerate the demonstration of fuel cell technology in trucks, to develop a permanent hydrogen fueling infrastructure for California's truck demonstration projects. And these are not in order and priority, these are just four. They're numbered 4, but they're not in order of priority, but they should all happen consequently at the same time. And this should be an effort to initiate the funded demonstration projects, fuel cell truck demonstration projects, because they're in the works, but they're not in place yet and operational. And then continue and expand public-private partnerships to discuss this technology and resolve challenges that will come up along the way. So with that, we're at the end of the presentation. Our next steps for this document are to as I mentioned, referred to earlier, to initiate a larger discussion on this topic. And this is really a first a start of the conversation, because there are no other strategy documents for fuel cell trucks out there. I'm not aware of such a document existing for battery or plug-in trucks. So there's a lot to discuss, but more to come, obviously, and we will go out and talk to as many stakeholders as we can, because the California Fuel Cell Partnership has a few truck stakeholders or trucking industry stakeholders, but there are still many that are interested in this and want to discuss this topic as an option for the future. So we will, again, as Ben referred to earlier when we started, make this presentation available on our website. And I think there will also be a recording available on our website. And here's my contact information. And you can send me an email, or you can also go to the Facebook page or use Twitter to communicate with us what your thoughts are, or if you have questions, and we'll try to respond those as swiftly as possible. I do have some additional slides, but those are for the audience later if they want to look at this presentation or have specific questions in that area. They're just for clarification of some of the development timelines for trucks and what costs are involved, as well as what we're talking about when we're talking about vocations, truck vocations.
Thanks, Nico. So again, if anyone on the call has a question, please go ahead and use the question feature through GoToWebinar. At the moment, we have one question. And our first question is the topic of using light-duty vehicles, the light-duty vehicle station network for medium and duty and heavy duty, is that a priority at the moment?
Is the topic a priority?
Is the topic being discussed, is that a priority to be discussed?
It is a priority, because those vehicles, those stations are really designed to fill passenger vehicles. That includes fueling protocols and the space available to get in and out of those stations. They're really not designed to facilitate trucks, both from a layout as well as from an engineering perspective. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it is an actual topic of discussion, both within the partnership as well as with the truck folks, or the truck projects that are currently funded that are not being implemented, as well as at the standard development organizations. In many ways, it's a topic of discussion.
Thanks. Second question. What's the relative scale of pollution of trucks versus passenger vehicles?
That's a good question. What's the relative
Scale of pollution?
So from a population perspective, the population of trucks, I mentioned earlier about 1 million vehicles. 1 million vehicles or 1 million trucks on the road in California, compared to several tens of millions of passenger cars on the road in California. So that's already a big difference, but these trucks pollute more than all the passenger cars together, because these trucks run on diesel in general and natural gas. Natural gas is better from an air quality emission perspective, but these trucks are, there's a lot of improvement that can be done, and zero-emission vehicle technology is really one way to really address the bottom line of what emission impact looks like. I don't know if that completely answers the question. I don't have a specific ratio on how it compares, but I do know that these trucks produce a lot more emissions on a comparable level than passenger cars.
Do you have a sense of how many medium-duty and heavy-duty fuel cell trucks are on the road today in California and nationally?
California and nationally. The numbers, I have the numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head. So I can provide those and give a sense, but that's all based on census and information that the different air quality management districts have in different parts of the state. So it is available, and I think I have those numbers somewhere. But they're not included in this. Actually, there is an overview in this document on. It gives an overview how the different vocations compare. It's in one of the first chapters of the document. It shows a graph which I don't have on here. It's related. It's the population by class. So for medium heavy-duty trucks, it is in the range of 250,000 vehicles in all of California. So that's for medium-duty vehicles. Heavy-duty is about the same population, but they make many more miles, and so many more emissions.
Along that same line, do we have a visibility of total miles traveled or gallons of diesel consumed?
Pretty much that same overview. It's figure 2 in the document. It's on page 13 of the document. Shows you also how many miles are traveled with all those vehicles combined. So if you assume some sort of average fuel economy for these different truck vocations, you should be able to make a calculation of what the amount of fuel is that is used. But it's very significant. For example, the overall heavy-duty truck market, and we're only talking about one vocation here, which is drayage or short-haul trucks, class 7 and 8, is it's about 40 million miles traveled, which is a lot of miles. So, say if you make an assumption about fuel economy, you can come to a number of an amount of fuel used, and this is just talking about the 250,000 trucks on the road, heavy-duty trucks.
So I see a couple of attendees with their hands raised. Again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type that into the questions feature of GoToWebinar, and we'll answer those. Next question, are there any existing requirements or mandates for zero-emission vehicle trucks?
Nope.
I'm going to read this one verbatim. Do you know how many heavy-duty and medium-duty truck conversion companies are actively modifying trucks now?
For fuel cell application?
For fuel cell application.
I think about 3 or 4.
I'm going to read verbatim. How was the metrics targets developed? And are these targets seem to be significantly less than the baseline vehicle? Do you have a customer database to support the targets?
So the heavy-duty targets come from a report, as our document also referred to, from CalHeat. They did a study in the South Coast Air Basin about drayage trucks, and that's what all those parameters are based on. They're developed based on. I can go back to the overview. Let me go back several slides. Build up. So on the right side, I pulled it up again. The baseline, those are the drayage trucks that are in operational, and that's the typical diesel. That's what a typical diesel truck has to meet. The targets are basically an up. So the CalHeat document talks mainly about plug-in trucks. We adjusted it for fuel cell trucks, and we also got input from operators as well as from the folks that develop these the plug-in trucks that are used for drayage. And plug-in trucks typically go up to 100 miles. And the expectation is that fuel cell trucks should be able to cover 100 to 200 miles, which is about half of the baseline, but it is more than sufficient to meet one full day of operations. And what I don't think I emphasized this, but in both these vocations return to base at the end of the day, so they can be filled at that point. For the medium-duty trucks, this is based on the baseline is what it is. This comes from this is typical for a UPS or FedEx delivery vehicle, and we received this from one of our members that is working on a project in this area. And then the targets are also based on what UPS requires as the minimum requirement for this package delivery truck to be successful. The plug-in version of a delivery vehicle, the medium-duty vehicle, gets up to about 80 miles range per day, 80 to 100 max. So it was was assumed that with a fuel cell as a range extender for these vehicles, it should be able to do at least 125 miles a day, and that would cover, I think, about 90 to 95% of all the potential routes that a delivery vehicle would take on any given day. So this would be a pretty all-around vehicle for companies like FedEx or UPS.
So with medium-duty and heavy-duty fuel cell electric vehicle trucks on the road already, are we really looking at 7 to 15 years to develop a new platform, or something less to ramp production on existing platforms?
Yes, we're really looking at 7 to 15 years to get to a fully commercial vehicle. The reason why is because currently there's no truck manufacturer fully working on taking all of this on and doing the full integration. There are a number of integrators working on it. There are fuel cell technology development companies that provide the fuel cells, but there has not been it's not to a point that they've optimized their systems or integrated and gone through several iterations of the design to come up with the best working and most efficient fuel cell truck. So you have to think in ways of like from the ground up design around the fuel cell kind of truck, and none of the trucks that are currently in the process of being built, because none of them are operational yet, have done that. They're all modifications of existing chassis to fit in the fuel cell. And it's similar to, I would say, to what happened to passenger fuel cell vehicles that also took that long to get to a car that's commercially viable and that can be brought into the market.
I think this is the last question here. Is what happened to Vision Industries or Vision Motors?
To my knowledge, they went bankrupt. That's what happened to them.
All right. Thanks, Nico. And so with that, before we close the webinar, we will have the presentations available on our website, and that's going to be at cafcp.org. Also, again, if you have any suggestions for future webinars, you can email that to us at info@cafcp.org, and we will look into getting those webinars for a future webinar series. So again, thank you, Nico, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. Nico, any closing statements?
No closing statements. Contact me if you have questions, or if you would like to discuss this. I've had a number of discussions already. Obviously, we are open to more conversations, and we're looking forward to writing a roadmap sometime in the future, because this is just an action plan. It's an initial, it really serves as the initial start of the conversation, and there's much more to learn and to do here.
Oh, sorry, Nico, we do have one more question that just popped up. Do you believe that the only way truck OEMs will move towards zero emissions is if they are mandated to?
That's a good question, but I'll refrain from my personal opinion here. I think we should have a conversation about that. There may be alternative ways, but that's TBD, because I know that truck manufacturers are currently not investing in this technology.
All right, thanks, Nico. And again, thank you all for attending. Again, we'll have the presentation and the recording available on our website.
Thank you.